Hi everybody, welcome to the General Counselling podcast with your host this week, Billy Partridge Nordia. So I sit on the Commerce and Industry team. Joining me here today is Joshua Blake, Managing Director for our interim business services and in-house teams. And we've got Ben here who runs Crafty Counsel. Crafty Counsel are a business that Montresor have partnered with a lot over the last couple of years. Have done some amazing things in their space, building community, bringing in-house lawyers together. And Ben, I'd love to sort of pick your brains over the next little while about all things crafty and how you're seeing the market at the moment.
Great. Well, thanks, Billy, and thanks, Josh. Thanks for this invitation. Really great to be here. We really appreciate the partnership with Montresor. So looking forward to having a lot of fun in this conversation.
Fantastic. So Ben, I think firstly we're quite interested to hear sort of about you and the way that you're working at the moment at Crafty as a founder of a business. A common complaint that we often hear is that you're pulled in lots of different directions at all times. How do you manage that at Crafty? How do you make sure that you're not pulling those Clifford Chance-esque all-nighters?
So I think probably how I manage that now is quite different to how I used to manage it. How I manage it now is by having a really, really good team. So they do say that what you should try and do is go and hire people who are smarter than you. So I've really embraced that.
Sarah will love to hear that. Yeah.
From maybe maybe I set a low bar, but but I was So right now it's having a really fab team. Feels like we're in a really good place at the moment with the team at Crafty. Great team, people who we all know kind of what each other's roles are and jobs are and areas of responsibility. And we're going through a moment where that feels really good and that feels like people have a clear understanding. There's always stuff that we can improve, but that's really empowering. And that for me is really helpful. It means that I can step back and not be so involved in the weeds. Still work hard, but right now it's sort of having that trust that everybody's gonna do what they need to do, and conversely it's really important for them that I give them that trust, because there's nothing worse than having a boss who's just sort of leaning over you all day and sort of in the weeds and pointing at things.
You can't micromanage that many people either. Probably
right.
Be difficult.
Yeah, it's not really scalable, and and I think in the past I've probably fallen into that trap, and I've fallen into the trap of thinking that I need almost not having the confidence to step back and thinking I need to show my work by sort of visibly doing things and creating things. I don't know, writing agendas for events or just doing very visible, busy work. But I think one of the challenges as a founder is that stuff. It's like junk food that you is bad for you, but it's sort of satisfying in the moment. So answering more emails. Doing more meetings, more coffees, more
chasing the dopamine of getting the to-do list.
Yeah, exactly. And I did spend weeks and months, and actually they've just been mainly consumed in that sort of stuff. And quite often as a founder, what you don't have is someone who's standing over you saying, well, but where's the 6-month plan, Ben? What are we doing next year? What are we doing strategically? And so having that, you need to have a bit of discipline to realise that, and then step back and give yourself the time to do those things.
That's an interesting one. Does anyone hold you to account? Do you have like an NED, or how do you generally just try and manage that yourself?
We've got investors, so we've done some angel funding at Crafty. So that's one level, and I do like a regular, but I'd say probably not frequent reporting to them. So usually quarterly, in terms of like a written report. This is what's going on. To a great extent, that's a discipline for me. So me having to do that does provide that little bit of oversight. And I guess in common with lots of lawyers, I'm quite a sort of like I'm a person who likes to get gold stars. So like so having sending homework to someone and having feedback is quite helpful. So that's sort of one level. Day to day, actually, it's a team. Like we've got quite an open culture, and we, for example, every Monday we have to work together. I think later we might talk about hybrid working, but the way we do it, we have to work together on a Monday, and we have quite an open discussion around what happened last week, what's going to happen this week, how are we doing on various things, and I encourage them to give me like quite a lot of
honest feedback.
Okay.
So,
which is great. So, and they're quite like there's usually a lot of laughing in those meetings, so that's a good one. my wife. So
amazing.
I quite often say to the team, like, I'll come in on a Monday and I'll say, you know what, like I've been thinking. When I say I've been thinking,
we know who's really been thinking.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and literally one of the team the other day did say, look, Ben, this is so great. Do you think that how would you feel about going to do Mari's job for a little while, and she could come and hang out with us? That would be really useful. So yeah, investors, team, my wife. And we've got an advisor in the company, not an NED as such, but a really super guy called James Mays. He used to be a CEO of a actually in some ways similar company but in a different vertical. So a company building community but for product managers called Mind the Product, as in like tech product managers. Quite a few. There are a few similarities between like our business model and I guess our values and community building to what they were doing with that company. They were sort of a decade more ahead of where we are, and he exited that business a couple of years ago. We met after that, and he's sort of come on as a formal advisor to Crafty, comes in once a month to the office, spends some time with each of us, and that again quite helpful, and another sort of outside experience perspective to give me a little bit of challenge and feedback.
It's important, right, to have other people who you trust around you.
Yeah.
It's actually, lonely at the top.
Lonely at the top, yeah.
Not there yet.
I realised we jumped into things without really you getting a chance to sort of run us through Crafty in general.
Sure. Yeah.
I mean, I'm so initiated that I assume everybody in the entire world knows exactly what the team do and you do, but I'd love to sort of have you summarise, I guess, what Crafty is.
Thanks, Billy. I mean, in a nutshell, we're a community for in-house legal. So we exist to bring joint insight and connection to in-house legal professionals. Tangibly, that's a bunch of things for them. So we're probably now best known for events. We do a big summer event called Crafty Fest.
The funnest legal event of all time. I'm well aware.
And we very much enjoyed your participation there.
Thank you so much.
But yeah, it is a fun one. So that's probably the biggest UK event for in-house legal. So Crafty Fest, it's a sort of festivalised conference in Regent's Park, as you know. We do several conferences during the year, and we do a whole bunch of dinners, breakfast, stuff like that. But parking the events, there's a big sort of digital component as well. There's a message board, there's various WhatsApp groups, there's online meetups over Zoom, podcast video, etc. But probably people mainly see externally the events, and for our in-house community members, it's a great chance to get together, swap notes, and just feel a little bit less lonely, a little bit isolated, often in small legal teams, and not reinventing the wheel so much, finding new friends that they can ask, is this normal, is that normal, how do you normally do it?
There does seem to have been a bit of a shift from it being purely networking to also quite educational from what we've noticed in the journey. Can you kind of talk us through how that came about and what you're doing a bit differently now to when it started out?
Oh, that's a really interesting observation, Josh. And I suppose that's true. So when we started with the very first, going back a couple of years, origin story of Crafty was actually in education. So I was working as an in-house lawyer at a tech company, and I thought there must be a way to learn from each other. And that problem of loneliness, isolation, etc., that was the one I was trying to address, and I really felt that. But the thought I had at that time was that we should address this through video content, and it wasn't so much events. Went down that route for a while, and fun enough, it was during COVID that we then pivoted the business, because this incipient video business, our like early fans were saying, that's fine, but actually we really want to meet those people, and that would be really powerful. Hence why we started doing position as a community. We started doing events online during COVID and then in person. So to your question, Josh, like the first in-person things we started doing were taking these online meetups that we had during the pandemic and then bringing them to life. So we went for breakfast, we went for dinner, and they were predominantly networking. But as time has gone by, we've just been adding in more and more content and finding that people do value that. And one of the interesting things for us has been trying to find out where's the balance. So how much do people just want to see each other and hang out and forge new connections, and how much do they want to learn from each other? And if learn from each other, from whom and in what format? Is it, do we bring in a law firm? Do we bring in a tech company to talk about what they're doing? Or is it to GCs talking to each other? So that evolution has come from feedback from community members. And we're constantly feeling our way as to what's the right balance over any given event, for example, of how much content, how much networking, etc.
Yeah, no, I think I noticed it certainly in the fintech day. I learned a lot in that kind of whatever 7-8 hours, more than I'd learned maybe in several meetings. So I think that's really useful, and I guess that's in part due to, is it kind of Toby's curation? I know he's helped out a lot on that side of things, but where else have you kind of drawn inspiration on how to put these events together and provide that kind of educational piece?
For sure. So within the team, we've got a couple of people who have made such a huge difference. So Toby joined. So for those who don't know him, Toby Hornet. Toby's actually been involved with Crafty in various ways for a few years, but we sort of have been drawing him in over time, and he joined us as our full-time head of community earlier this year, so at the beginning of 2023. He's been fab. So his job is basically delight the community. So he spends all day, every day, talking to people, trying to learn from them, learn what they want. He does, I think, often a couple of days a week. Well, he'll just block book Calendly and have rolling chats with people, and we get from him such an insight into what's going on. We get great feedback as well. So we've had great feedback on some events. Just today, he reported, look, I just had a chat with a community member who went to one of our recent conferences, thought some of it was fab, but actually a couple of panels, maybe here's some food for thought. And we all thought, actually, that's valid, so we'll learn from that next time. So some of the stuff that we've done has come directly from him. One thing Toby brought in was he attended, I think, some of our earlier conferences and said, look, format-wise, you're doing a lot of sort of the classic thing of having like back-to-back panels. Why don't we try to mix it up a bit? So something you will have seen at FinTech Day is we had Toby at the beginning of the day having everybody in the room and saying, right, I want you to each take a small revision card, and I want you to write on it the thing that is most bothering you right now about your job in fintech. And then we're going to use those cards to figure out what we're going to talk about in one of the sessions in the afternoon.
Wow, okay.
And we all vote, so everyone wrote on their card.
Amazing.
And then we had a process of passing the cards around and voting on which were the best ones.
Couldn't be more current, could it?
Really super.
That's fantastic.
And so then that meant in the afternoon he could turn around and say, he didn't just pick the best one, but he said, look, actually, I spent a few hours now looking at these, and basically you might be interested to know that they all pretty much cluster into three areas. Yeah. And that gives everyone in the room such an insight into what everyone else is thinking. So in that case, I think AI was top of mind. I mean, various permutations on AI, but actually that was the bucket. And when Toby showed us the data later, actually that was like 70% of the cards said AI.
Oh my gosh, I bet.
So that was a big one. Lots of stuff around careers, really interesting in various ways. And the other from that event, I can't remember. But AI and careers is more interesting.
But it just speaks to that, like making people feel less lonely. Like 70% of your peers in this room are also worried about that.
Exactly.
That's such a great feeling. Like I'm not really messing this up that badly.
Yeah. And it's super powerful. And people say like really quite like they're kind of burying their soul a bit, particularly perhaps in that format where well, this question is not going to end up connected to me. So
you can open the floodgates a bit.
Exactly. We had one person who said, I'm a female lawyer, and I find that I find it really hard to know how to tell my business colleagues no, without being told that I'm basically some variation on like bossy.
Wow.
Really interesting. And so we just opened that up at one point in the afternoon to 150 people talking about that. Saying actually, how much do other people recognise this? This clear sexism in what she's experiencing.
And that's all you can ask for is conversations around those things, right? In a room full of people who do affect change in businesses. So it's a measured effect that you can open that forum up. It's amazing. You did mention AI. I'm so glad, because I feel like
apparently it's a big thing.
It's all I talk about. It's not. I talk about lots of other things, but AI definitely this year has been huge. And I think alongside that has come the rise of sort of, especially in the last couple of years, legal tech. I know it's something that you will speak about a lot as well. You'll have a lot of coverage and you speak to a lot of different suppliers too, obviously. Keen to hear your approach to legal tech, whether or not, or what you subscribe to in terms of how you go out and search the market, what's useful, what's relevant. How are you finding navigating that?
Really hard. So, like, based on no data, purely just anecdotage and sentiment, I thought just over a year ago that actually the bubble was bursting a little bit. I thought that people were becoming less interested in legal tech. There were a lot of products that were broadly doing quite similar things.
Yeah.
I thought, maybe we're starting to see a little bit of consolidation creeping in as well, and a bit of jadedness from the in-house community. But then Gen AI came along at the end of last year and just seemed to reinflate everything and then some. And I think not without validity. I think Gen AI is a transformative technology. So we are living through very, very interesting days with that. Yeah. It's hard to keep on top of it. Even as a company, where part of our job is to sort of keep our hands in with what's happening across the market. It's really, really hard, and it's hard to do. It's hard to feel that you're not in any time just basically living an anecdote. That it's who you happen to have met, who seems hot,
so hot right now.
But I guess I do have a couple of thoughts, like for maybe in-house lawyers who might be listening to this and thinking, how can they get their heads around AI? Would that, or like, legal tech in general, would that be helpful?
Very helpful, yes.
So I think, like, quite often it's a bit of truism, but truisms are true. Like, step one, if you're thinking that you need to invest in technology, that might be true, but the first thing is really, really, really understanding the problem that you're trying to solve. And it's so tempting to see all this stuff on like LinkedIn or at conferences like ours, or actually getting a lot of approaches from tech companies, and then having your head turned and thinking, that looks awesome, like that would be so cool.
This is going to solve all of my problems.
Exactly. But then the question is, what are the problems? And so like I've just heard time and time again in-house lawyers in our community say, look, I wish we'd spent more time really actually bottoming out what the problem was. Maybe we knew what the problem was, but how important was it? Like, maybe we were investing too much time and money into solving something when actually there were some bigger things elsewhere where we could have been a bit more impactful. And that's time with your team, that's time with the rest of the business. So understanding how they perceive legal, what their pain points with you are, all that stuff. There's like loads of work to be done before you actually even start thinking about technology. Then sort of within the technology landscape, I think, spending time trying to figure out what's out there. It doesn't hurt sort of going to things and getting a feel of what products are there. But actually, one of the smartest things you can do is talk to other people a bit like you. So once you've got a feeling of, let's say, we need a contract management system, then going to talk to other buyers. Right?
So referrals are so powerful.
In all areas of like professional life. So be it recruitment.
Exactly.
So that's it. And the thing can look really, really good, but you might find that you speak to a peer in another company, and they say, we thought it looked good too, but actually we didn't know the questions that we didn't ask. And if we had our time again, we would have asked X, Y, Z. Or it looked great, but it took ages to integrate. Or this feature actually was missing. We realized later that was really important. So spending that time on like finding out what others are doing, and bottoming out, like trying to learn from the mistakes of others, that can be really powerful.
Because it's so early stage, I guess a lot of it is anecdotal. Like you can only go far. Like we say, the power of the referral, just seeing the roadblocks that other people come up against.
It is, and it is also a smallish market. So to some extent, if you've got 3 or 4 people who've played with a particular product, that's not a bad sample set actually.
I was at a Legal Geek earlier this year, and I couldn't believe the amount of tech on offer. It was quite funny. No one wanted to speak to me, of course, being in recruitment. So I just glided through the gauntlet of tech providers. But seeing kind of heads of legal and GCs walk through there was a bit like Indiana Jones, kind of trying to work their way through the crowd and the obstacles that were there. So I think my question would be, how do you actually stand out as a provider of services? A similar thing for what we encounter in recruitment. At some point you grow so big from referrals, but then there is that element of cold outreach and looking to expand the business. So at some point you're going to have to be reaching out to people, and it's in such a crowded market difficult to differentiate yourself. So have you heard of good examples of how people do that, or what's been your experience with it?
Gosh, that's a really great question. Because you're right, it applies to tech, it applies to recruitment, law firms. You said, well, at some point you have to move past referrals. By the way, on this, I'm not an expert, so it's my sort of gut feeling.
Opinion will do.
Yeah, but I'll offer an opinion anyway. You said, well, at some point you have to move past referrals, but maybe just to pause there. I think like the experience of actual customers or clients is really so powerful, and so they often say build a thing that a small number of people really love rather than a large number of people like. I think there's probably some truth to that. Like if you can get that sort of initial like customer set or client set absolutely raving about you, then that's going to be a great start, and they're going to talk to their friends. But then you can also probably lean on them when you need to scale up a bit. You can start using them for the case studies, or getting them to come and be your wingman or women at events, and like talk about that thing that we did together, that project, etc. So if you're really delighted those early people, they'll not only go and tell their friends, but you can probably work with them on the other ways that you want to scale that are a bit more sophisticated.
Yeah, no surprises that the head of a business that founds community suggests more community.
Yeah, more yeah, do more of that.
No, I love that. I think it is really good. It's really good advice. And your reputation is the most important thing you've got, especially what we do. Important to preserve it.
Yeah. Hard though, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, I just wish everybody liked me all the time. I know we did touch on it slightly earlier, but I'm going to circle back round to sort of time in the office. You said that Crafty are all in every Monday all together. Yeah. I love that. Yeah. I would go mad if I was home all the time, so I do like spending time with the team, even Josh. We are seeing a shift. COVID is slightly behind us, and people are moving back to sort of more stringent working models. What are you seeing in the market? What are people saying to you about the switch back to work, and how are you approaching it at Crafty?
Well, I'll start with the end first, so how we're approaching it at Crafty. So we've been on a journey, and that like loads. I constantly find with Crafty that like, I look at what we were doing a year or more ago and think, God, Ben, why were you doing that? Like all these like bad decisions. And unfortunately, I'm self-aware enough to know that probably in a year's time I'll be doing the same. I'll be listening back to this and thinking, oh God,
that's terrible advice.
Yeah, exactly. But so I think one thing we've managed to do, and maybe it's easier with a smallish team, is where we've landed this year is we've been much more deliberate about what we want to do and why, and that's I think still some good stead. So if we go back to 2022 and 2021, so we were remote first. We'd come together every once in a while in person, but we were very inconsistent about when that would be. So we went through a phase of saying, well, it's once a month we'll do a team day. But actually, one thing I discovered on my leadership journey is like routines and predictability are really, really helpful, and like wasting people's brain space on things that they don't need to be wasted on is a really bad idea. So we had like a whole Slack channel which was just debating what, like, okay, this month when we say it's once a month, is it a Tuesday or is it a Wednesday? Because like I've got a haircut and I actually need to be in town this day. And then like you get to the Monday and someone says, I thought you said Chancery Lane, like I'll put the place on Tottenham Court Road.
Gosh, yeah.
Just round and round and round. And all for like one day a week in the office. And so then when we came to 2023, I said, right, we're done with that. We are going to do like at least one day, and it's going to be the first day of the week, and we're going to do that, and it's going to be our we're going to do the team meets. We'll do as many one-to-ones as possible. So all of that stuff, that was like the whole week had been filled with like little one-to-ones and stuff. So all the internal stuff, like let's try and get like 90% of it all crammed into that day. And everyone also has to accept that you're going to send very few emails on that day. And,
sure.
But that's okay. Tuesday is the day for like the action and the follow-up, but Monday as much as possible, then we'll do all the internal things. So inevitably, it never works completely like that, but we've got quite close. And that routine that we always have to come in that day, and you know that like barring illness or holidays or disaster, everyone's going to be around, that set expectations really well. And then meant the rest of the week, we can kind of say, well, do what you want. And do what you want sort of then turns into, well, it depends on what your role is, right? Yeah. So if you're Sarah, who you guys know, who's our head of commercial,
the best,
or Henry supports Sarah, then they are spending a lot of time speaking to people like you guys. So they want to be in town, and also I think by probably preference, like to be in town and around people. some of the rest of the team are more home birds, and that's also okay. So as long as we sort of do that stuff, we've identified the bits that we need to be together for, and we've identified other days where you can, as a professional, you can make your own choice based on like what's appropriate for you and your role. So we'll continue to evolve it. All right, we're evolving right now because we're about to move. So we're 8 people, and currently we're co-working. We don't have a private office.
Right.
So the meetings are described like we're booking a meeting room somewhere. And we're about to move to a new building because we're going to move to private office. We got too big. We can't.
Congrats!
Yeah, it's great. Yeah. Great. So yes, it will be nice. It's not quite as like ritzy as the current place we're in, but like
that would be difficult.
But we'll have doors and a window and everything. So
like, all the mod cons.
All the mod cons. So that's a nice change. So then, what's the relevance of that to the rest of the market? I guess one thing I feel like we've tried to do, and I'm not saying we're perfect, but at least we're trying, is to say, well, in our case, like why in person, why remote, like what's in person good for, let's try and max out on those things rather than like everyone go into the office and spend all day on Zoom calls with other people in their offices, but actually you're just on Zoom calls, and it's so easy to end up in that situation. So but it's obviously easier to do that if you have a small team or small company and you can kind of make those decisions together. Does that help?
Yeah,
it really does, yeah.
I was just going to say, it's quite a difficult one, even for us, because there's so many people to cater for and so many opinions at the table. And I think you run the risk of sounding like a bit of an old man when you say, oh, back when I started in recruitment, you know, it was shirt and tie and at 8 a.m. and they're 5 days a week. So I think there's an element of that generational dichotomy where people who are a bit more senior now, they look down and think, oh, you've got it so easy. So I think that's something that we've noticed a lot of clients are sort of struggling to strike a good balance on at the moment.
I'm really interested in your opinion on this because you guys are seeing what's happening in the recruitment market, and in particular like supply and demand. Like I'm constantly wondering all the stuff that you hear about, you know, millennials, Gen Z, etc.
Sure.
Like how much is this? Like how much is it a general like a cultural difference versus actually it's just like where is the balance of power lying as between employee and employer? So like right now,
that's such a good question.
Are candidates pushing for remote, or
they increasingly as with everything, there's a spectrum, and there are people who absolutely can't stand to work from home, and there are people, you know, that will always exist. I think when a client comes to us now and tells us it's 5 days a week in the office mandated, we all sort of grimace slightly as we take it to market because it's a harder sell. People have, I think it's about, you know, what you're describing at Crafty seems like a mature approach to the way that people need to do their job. You know, you're listening to what the team are doing. Everyone's responsible for their workload, and that works for you guys. And I think that's what people are looking for, that sense of, you know, a mature approach to the way that they operate. And are they a trusted advisor to the business? And do you think that they would be able to do their job properly at home? And oftentimes is the case they can. I don't know. Yeah, Josh, I think probably you would you agree on the 5 days a week thing?
I would. One of the things you touched on, Ben, as well is, you know, who's it being led by? Who's the conversation getting led by at the moment? Because if you were to ask us a year ago, we'd say, you know, absolutely it's the candidate's choice because everyone was hiring, you know, everyone was desperate to get good people. So you had to offer what you could, be it, you know, salaries went crazy, working from home, you know, you had to offer it in certain places. I think we've moved into a bit more of what we call a client-led market, in the sense that there are a few less opportunities. So if people, you know, maybe in private practice really wanting to move in-house, if there's a lot of them, if it's maybe something like corporate lawyers where there aren't as many vacancies, you know, that have been coming up this year, you know, it's a bit easier now for a client to say, you know, you're in 4 or 5 days a week and still have some bites. So it really does depend on sort of when you're asking, and no doubt if someone listens to this in 6 months' time, it'll be completely rubbish advice, and things might have changed again. But at this point in time, I'd say, I think, clients are able to get away with it a little bit more.
You interviewed us back then. That's pro podcasting. So I think a theme that's come up a lot over the last little while, and we hear about it a lot at Crafty, is the becoming a trusted sort of business partner. Things like working with sales teams, marketing teams, procurement teams across the board. It's not necessarily something they teach you in your training contract, is how to deal with a business. that is obviously changing, a lot more as we see the SQE becoming more popular. But what's your opinion on the approach to upskilling in these areas in a business, as someone who speaks to a lot of in-house lawyers?
Gosh, there's it's sort of the topic that keeps on giving.
Yeah.
So because I think you can probably never be done as like a person who is an effective colleague to work with. Sort of thing.
Yeah.
Some of I keep thinking back to Crafty Fest this year. We had the keynote delivered by Andy Cook, who's a general counsel at Travel Perk, a B2B SaaS travel company. And that was just so great. And he talked a lot about this topic and what they were doing in their case to partner with the business, but also really understand the business. And so one of the things I really liked about how he framed things was talking in terms of customer personas.
Yeah.
So, which is a phrase that you more readily associate with marketing.
Yeah.
I think with a lot of lawyers, certainly I used to probably think, oh, that's just marketing stuff, or obvious things like not like my contracts or whatever. But I really enjoyed the way that he described that. So, really, basically, he and his team really taking the time to dig into who are we facing off with internally, and what do they need, and also that process helped them flesh out, and I think this probably applies to other businesses, that need is very different depending on who you're talking to. So the persona of the person in the C-suite and what they expected from their legal team was completely different to the person in sales. And I think in a way that insight helps to address the contradiction between, as an in-house lawyer, I'm expected to be both highly empathetic, up on all the trends, great advisor, strategic, but also efficient, fast turnaround, all this stuff. Yeah. And actually, when you think of that in terms of, it's actually often it's different people want those things at different times. So your CEO might want you to be the strategic advisor, particularly as the GC. How are we going to do our next funding round, or when, and who do we need to be talking to now, and how do we protect ourselves, what's market, what regulations coming down the line, etc. The salesperson just doesn't care about any of that stuff. As Andy said, their ideal interaction with legal is often short, and ideally not talking to a lawyer. So that's the person who might want to get an NDA really quickly, or they might want, the customer gave us this comment, can you please tell me it's okay?
Just get it done, basically.
Say yes.
So I thought that insight I thought was really helpful, thinking in terms of customer personas, spending that time to really understand who are the main types of people you're facing off with, and then actually does that help you make decisions about how you organise the team yourselves.
Yeah, and to what extent as well should they have good product knowledge? We were actually working with a fast food business recently, and they had quite an interesting extreme, which was get people in different parts of the business to go and make the pizzas and see how things work right on the front line. How much are lawyers expected to know, or how much should the modern in-house lawyer know about what it is exactly they're selling?
As a generalisation, I think as much as possible. I love those stories about companies that do that. I was at a dinner recently and sat next to someone from Sainsbury's, and he was saying that they had a policy doing the same thing, that sort of the leadership team had to spend a certain number of days on the shop floor a year. I think that's great. I think it's grounding and humbling, and it shows you actually this is where the business is really happening, right? It's not necessarily really happening in head office with those contracts. It's happening in the fast food, at the counter, when the burger is being put in the back.
Literally.
But also, it's then, if you're going to be effective as a lawyer, really, really standing in the shoes of your client, and as an in-houser, then your client is someone internal. At FinTech Day, which you mentioned earlier, Josh, our FinTech conference this year, we had a panel on product, so product managers and lawyers working together, and we had a product manager who was talking about exactly that. And he said, I really appreciate the lawyers who can stand in my shoes and understand. The more, they don't need to be technical, but the more that they understand about what we're doing, then the more they're going to be able to help. And the earlier that they're going to be able to say, I think you're going in this way, but that actually is going to be a dead end legally. can we work something else out together?
Yeah, and dealing with the business as well, I think that maybe gives you exposure to a different kind of skill set.
Yep.
And helps you to build up yourself and your own abilities. Because one thing we see a lot of now is lawyers moving into, as you've done, perfect example, a more entrepreneurial role, maybe running a business, whether it's a fractional GC thing, their own law firm. So I think actually getting different skills on the way is quite important.
Yeah.
I'd be interested to know kind of how you did that, because typically Clifford Chance, then in-house with Global Fashion Group, obviously you got good experience from those roles, but I'm guessing there wasn't much financial forecasting, trying to get funding and these kind of sales and marketing type stuff. So yeah, how does one upskill on that?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Just on the overall point of in-house lawyers working with different types of business functions, completely agree with you. I think actually a lot of the reason why people want to move in-house and why they're really excited when they do move in-house is because they get to work with all these different types of people. And quite often you hear no diss of private practice at all, but you hear a lot of ex-private practice lawyers saying, you know what, I worked with lawyers all day, and I'm a lawyer and I do love being a lawyer, but my interaction was 99% talking with other lawyers. And in-house I'm often like the only one with the legal knowledge, which is a bit scary, but then I have to talk to all these other people and they look at the world in a really, really different way. And that's quite grounding, but also quite exciting. So, and I felt like that when I was an in-house lawyer. So then in terms of your question about how, like, skills, if you, like, learning entrepreneurial skills, or like if you want your career to go in a different way, yeah, I think like learning from as much as possible from all the other people around you. I think I hadn't really thought about it, but it's probably true that I probably, at least in terms of self-confidence, would have found it harder to jump directly from Clifford Chance to start my own business,
surely,
than from in-house.
Definitely.
And I think that probably was to do with having worked with a whole bunch of different types of people. Just like little things, but they stick with you. Like, I remember I worked quite closely with our CFO and when I was in-house, and I quite often I had to calculate something, right? And I'd go to him with I'd rather have written it out on a piece of paper, and he would be like,
back of a fag packet.
Yeah, I thought that was okay. Look, I've done my sum, and he'd say, well, come back to me when you've got a spreadsheet, and even just stuff like that, like basic things where okay. And then actually that forced me to develop some basic Excel skills. Same thing working with marketeers. Fundraising was an interesting one. I literally remember thinking look, the bare bones of raising an angel funding round. Because when I was in-house, I worked in a tech company, we did a couple of big VC rounds. And the mechanics are the same. They basically are the same. And I thought, well actually, I think I know how to do that, that bit. I reckon I can do it. The danger then is actually, though, you end up gravitating towards the things that you're good at. So I found funding rounds, for example, I probably ended up maybe raising money too early with Crafty, and quite possibly because it was a thing that I knew how to do.
Okay.
And I could get a big, I could sort of tick, I've done that, and feel like I'm doing useful things. Whereas shying away from the things where I didn't even know where to start, which is probably really, really business planning and really
right, sure.
One of the quite cool things about the investments within Crafty Counsel is, am I right in thinking it's a few members and people who are actually involved with the community? I think that's maybe slightly different to how a lot of other businesses fundraise. Could you maybe speak a little bit to kind of how that came about, or what your experience was like?
Yeah, what we haven't done, for example, we haven't done a crowdfunding, which I thought about, and a business like ours might choose to do. Could look in the future, and crowdfunding I think can be quite useful when you've got a member base or a customer base, and then you really galvanise them around the mission. So that, for obvious reasons, sort of had that made me. Gave me pause for a while, thinking, well, should we do that? But we've raised sort of angel money over time, and we last did that a little bit over a year ago, and in that round, I mentioned it to some of our community members. I think we even put it in the bottom of our newsletter. So just said, P.S. We're doing a funding round. If anyone wants to talk, then hit reply and happy to have a chat about it. And we've got several of the community members then invest in themselves, which is great, really cool, and it feels really great because you've got people who, well, not metaphorically, but actually are invested in the success of what we're doing.
Exactly.
And are then also very generous with their time. And so thinking about, giving feedback on what we're doing, the good, the bad, the ugly, like how can we take this forward, etc., etc. So that's been exciting. And alongside them, some current and former private practice lawyers, a couple of tech people, a couple of people from outside legal, which is helpful. Media.
Nice.
Fantastic. So as we sort of come to the end of a few of our questions here, I wanted to round up on what I think people would really want to pick your brains on, which is, what is your biggest tip as someone who was a lawyer who's left private practice and moved in-house successfully? In doing that, obviously joining Crafty is going to be high on the list, but what else would you say is the best way to approach something like that?
I'm going to choose my words carefully on this one. That I'm really delighted with where I am now, and I also had a really great experience as an in-house lawyer at the company that I work for.
Yeah.
But I don't know if my decision making about making that particular move at that time was quite right. So actually, the in-house move, it was lots of fun. I met lots of great people. Had a really good experience for about 3 years. But I think if I had my time again, I might have approached it a little bit differently, despite all of that.
What would you have done differently then?
Well, I was really reactive. I was like, I liked. It wasn't that I was unhappy at Clever Chance, but I think I was about 4 years qualified. Yeah. I had realised that I probably didn't want to jump on the partnership track, and I wanted to do something else. I'd done an in-house comment, so that's a tip. I think that's a good one.
A great one.
Yeah, so done that, like that, and I knew I probably wanted to leave. But I became really reactive instead of proactive.
Sure.
So I remember, like, night after night, I'd be sitting there at like midnight drafting something, and then I'd be like looking at the lawyer's career page and like seeing all these jobs which looked completely identical, and then like writing to them. And I think if I had my time again, I would have done it a bit differently. I would have found a couple of recruiters who I thought really.
We didn't even pay you to say this.
No, well, it's true. So, and a couple of people who you really trust and are also have roles in the right sector.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess actually step one is figuring out what do you really, really want. Yeah. And I think I knew what I really wanted at that time. It was like, I really wanted to do was go work for a VC fund. So I was like waiting for the job ad for in-house lawyer at VC fund, ideally with like 3-4 years of experience for a Magic Circle firm, ideally one at Canary Wharf, maybe sitting on the 23rd floor. So amazingly, that specific job never sort of materialised. So I think developing those recruiter relations is important. But I think like what I could have done, having figured out the sort of thing I wanted to do, I could have, and encourage other people to, then like make a long list, right? Okay, well, what are those businesses? So you like write down on a spreadsheet what are the sorts of businesses that you'd like to go and work for. Go on LinkedIn and find out who are the people doing those jobs at the moment, and then go and like connect with them and like just ask them, can I buy you a coffee? And I think in my head I had this feeling of, well, I need to like that person will think I want their job, or that I'm asking them to find me a job, or I need to wait until they've left because actually I do want their job. But I think what I would have done is just said, well, like if you just write to someone and say, listen, I think your path looks really cool. I really would love to do something similar. Can I buy you a coffee and like just ask you a bit about it?
Yeah.
Then you'll probably like people tend to be flattered by that sort of thing, and you'll probably come away with like 3 or 4 other people who they suggest you should go and talk to these guys. So I didn't do that, and I think I would strongly recommend people to do that sort of thing, which is basically like sometimes people say in the abstract like use your network, but that's my like more concrete way of saying like use your network really proactively. So plan, figure out where you want to be, and just try and meet those people. And that's probably a better use of time than just hoping that something's going to turn up.
As the founder of Montresor says, good things happen when you meet people.
Well done for getting that.
Thank
Bingo.
you. Yeah.
I think a good analogy for what you were saying about kind of waiting for the right role to come up is, I think what I say to anyone who's thinking about speaking to recruiters, they're looking passively, LinkedIn, whatever, job boards. It's, if you've ever tried to move house and only ever looked on Rightmove, how long that would take, whether it's renting, buying, because a lot of the time, people will go to an agency first, or they'll have things that they can talk about which aren't just going to be posted and put on there, because as soon as that happens, obviously you've got hundreds of other people applying to it. It's difficult to get a response from anyone because there are so many applications, and it's maybe getting looked at by someone who isn't an expert in legal in the first place. If there's maybe like a large, no disrespect to internal recruitment teams, but if they're looking after loads of different areas within a business, it's difficult to be specialist in any one area. So a lot of the times people look for expert advice on that. So I think it's worth bearing in mind, and good to know that you kind of had that experience before. Not that it went too badly for you, but
no. And I suppose that the other, what you said prompted me to think something, which is that often it can take a couple of moves. Like I remember speaking to a friend in a Magic Circle firm who felt so stuck that he thought like his path was basically like he wanted to be a partner, that wasn't working out, and I think he just felt like don't know what else to do. Like I can be an in-house lawyer, but I don't really want to be one. And I think like he really felt like philosophically that his life choices were very limited. And like reflecting on him, I think it actually sometimes at first, like I think sometimes the thing that you can jump to like the first jump, that might be limited. That there might be a smaller set of options, but actually you might find that it's the second jump that then actually you've opened up a whole bunch of things. So the thing that I went to, like working at Global Fashion Group as an in-house lawyer, I had loads of fun, learnt lots. For various reasons, I thought I probably wasn't going to end up staying there more than a few years, but like opened up all sorts of possibilities. In the end, the one that I went for was starting my own business. But it like the things I could jump to after that were quite different to the things I could jump to after Clifford Chance.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I was speaking to another ex-CC lawyer who was saying very similar things the other day, that he made a sort of partner move which was kind of crazy, didn't work out. The firm ended up itself not working out.
Right.
No names mentioned.
Yeah.
But he's in a great role now. He said the thing is like he could never have jumped from point 1 to point 3.
Yeah.
He needed the one in the middle, even if it never ended up working out.
Yeah, you've got to take a longer view to your career than what's immediately the reward. You have to look a bit further in the future.
Sure. And not always expecting the next move to be the last one. I mean, that could be nice, but as you say, sometimes it's a stepping stone, a stalking horse onto something else, which is ultimately going to be better for you in the long run.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Cool.
Yeah, guys, this has been really fantastic. Yeah. Ben, thank you so much for your time on the podcast. Have you got anything that you'd like to plug? Anything coming up?
No. Oh,
how do people get in touch with Crafty?
All right.
What's happening?
What's happening? Well, when will this come out?
2024.
Yeah.
January.
January. Fine. So if you listen to this in January, we're doing a conference in February. So
fabulous.
So 22nd February, High Growth and VC Day. So,
I love the high growth and VC events. They're always really insightful. So
and it's nice putting those two people together, right? The two groups, so the in-house scale-up lawyers and the in-house VC lawyers.
Just makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay.
Might be in time for the breakfast as well, potentially, if we get this out in time.
That's right.
Was it 24th, I think?
Yeah, you will have. I need to check.
Okay.
We put you on the spot.
But you're right. We're doing like a big back to school community breakfast in January.
Sarah, if you're listening, quick, send through the the details.
That'd be great on the website, maybe.
Right. Ben, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks,
Josh,
Billy.
thanks for being here too.
Thank you.
I've been your host, Billy Partridge Nordia, signing off.
Cool.